Greetings, 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 greetings. I am King Clifford Jefferson. I'm a descendant of God for the fifth kind of man Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know at the Third Temple English Church is no other than Jesus Christ or the King of Peace. It is February the 16th, 2024, which is in the Berber year 2974. I greet you in the name of my ancestors, our forefathers, our foremothers, all those who came before us to prepare the way. This message is on behalf of all my brothers and sisters who are suffering as a result of not knowing what it is that they themselves were called to do. And that was to come home to your, what we call your nation or your government, i.e. your body or politics, all right? Because this is how you uh, uh, bring claim in lieu of your remedy based upon unconscionable contracts. Because the contract that is now unconscionable is a result of the social contract or the social compact that has been broken with the English people. Okay? The social contract or the social compact that has been broken with the English people. As I showed in my last lecture, that 46 million, 46.5 million people on this in the United States are identified by Black people, and there's 49.5%, 49.5% million people identify as English people on this planet, but nobody seems to be taking the identity of the English Anglo-Saxon Berbers. All right, we can look to Frederick Douglass because he did declare himself to be an Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Saxon of paternity, and as a result of that, he found his way from bondage to freedom because he realized that he was the original party in the contract or the social contract. All right, therefore his rights preceded him. You have no rights as a people because you have broken the social contract. They didn't. You did. Whether you voluntarily agreed to it or involuntarily agreed to it, you have broken the contract. All right? So let's go. So I suggest that every one of you who are listening to this lecture to take this lecture very seriously because as I always have a narrative to focus on. All right, we're going to hear a short video by a sister. I want to give honor to him for the recognizing that the social contract has been broken. But a lot of us misunderstand what social contract has been broken. They call it the black social contract. If you call it the black social contract, then you have no contract with the government because we know blacks' rights come by way of them being uh, given citizenship under the 14th Amendment by way of their emancipation because of the 13th Amendment. And prior to that time, they were considered property. All right. And as property, or whether you were not property anymore, being emancipated, a free man under the 14th, under the Naturalization Act of 1790, you were not considered citizens of the United States. All right. And then when they declared you a citizen of the United States by virtue of the 14th Amendment, those born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. Because if you're born into a body of politics, then you become, and you're allowed to be a part of that body of politics, then you become a citizen and you're afforded the rights that they want to give you. They might not be the rights that you naturally or by virtue of your birth were inherited uh, 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 are prescribed by your ancestors, all right, your forefathers. Yes, these are your inheritable rights, i.e., your rights that are transferred down by descent, all right. And the government there is to protect you because that's what the government was instituted to protect rights, all right, your civil liberties, all right. So let's see where we went wrong based off this social compact or social contract, all right. Let's get busy. Everybody, please listen very closely to what's being said.
When you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the street. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, and then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. And some people are like, well, those are people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, let's say that's what it is. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing it. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. But they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that phone, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. Economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. If I decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. And then we played another 50 rounds, and everything that you gained and you earned was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, and you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. You break the contract when you killed us in the street. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract.
We're going to watch that again. All right? We're going to watch that again. Greetings, County Search. We're going to watch that again, y'all.
When you have
listen to the pain.
Unrest like this,
listen to the pain in this sister's heart. All right? That's not coming out her mouth. That's coming from her heart. All right? That shit is coming from her mouth. Okay? So if all who's watching this channel, you must view this lecture from the pain that's coming from this sister's heart, that's spilling throughout her vocal cords and in regards to the social contract that we so-called say we're a part of, but have no identity in the contract whatsoever. All right? Y'all better listen.
There are three types of people in the street. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, and then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, let's say that's what it is. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing it. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that phone, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. Economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. If I decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. And then we played another 50 rounds, and everything that you gained and you earned was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played and you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. You broke the contract when you killed us in the street. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract.
You broke the contract. That's pain.
When you have
That's pain. All right? That's pain. That's the pain I feel. That's the pain I feel. All right? But I can't show my pain that way. All right? My pain, it can't be the result of the pain we feel. My remedy for my pain is to try to fix what she was talking about, what? The broken contract. How do we fix the broken contract? We first must recognize what system is being in play here in North America. Because we have the system that it was founded off, and then we got the system that it was replaced by. All right? We got the system that it was founded off, and we got the system that it was replaced by. So this is what we're going to talk about. All right? The foundation of which this government was founded off based off the implied social compact. Okay? A lot of y'all don't really know what that term means. All right? You use it every day to express the relationship that you have to that social contract, but not establish the stipulations of the contract which pertains to you. That's the problem. Okay? That's the problem. This is what we need to fix. So let's review this curriculum that should be a curriculum that is being taught to all those that you just see in that film that I just displayed by that sister. All right? So let's go. Hopefully I don't have any problems today. Social contract. As with all lectures, I show receipts. If you look to the right, you see a picture of a depiction of Leviathan written by Thomas Hobbes. All right. Leviathan. We're gonna go into that briefly. All right. Leviathan. Let's blow this up some. As you can see, this is taken from the book of Job. Everybody know who Job was from the Bible. All right. Job was tested. He was allowed to go through hardship to test his faithfulness. All right. That's the abstract story. I'm gonna give you the concrete story. All right. The story of Job was basically God not being in the midst of his children. Okay, that's pretty much the story. That's pretty much the same as the king not being in the midst of his government. All right, or the president not being in the midst of his government, or the school teacher not being in the midst of the students, or the mother or father not being in the midst of the family. You have an all-out war, chaos, no guidance, no leadership. All right, this is the problem. This is the problem. As you can see, this person here represents the sovereign. Okay, he has the sword and the scepter. It's called a cloister. All right. As you can see depicted on his body, you see the dominion of the people. Let's see if I can show you this. All right. If you look at all the people, their heads are facing the sovereign or looking to the sovereign. Okay? We know the sovereign rules the land. We know the sovereign rules the land. Then they have a depiction of the temporal and the spiritual, the civil and the religious. Okay? Let's go out of here. As you can see, you have a castle, church, Make sure you all see it. All right, you have a castle, you have a church, you have a crown, you have a mitre or mitre, you have a cannon, you have lightning bolt or something, you have military um, um, weaponry. You know what I'm saying? They have a contrast. We're going to read the contrast down below, based off the depiction of Leviathan, which is really based upon a contract. Okay, a social contract. So let's review this. In moral and political philosophy, the social contract is an idea, theory, or model that usually, although not always, concerns the legitimacy of the authority of the state over the individual. Conceptualized in the age of enlightenment, it is the core concept of constitutionalism. While not necessarily conveyed and written down, it is constituent assembly and constitution. All right? Not necessarily written down, but in a constituent assembly and constitution. Social contract arguments typically are that individuals have consented either explicitly or tacitly to surrender some of their freedoms and submit to the authority of a ruler or to the decisions of a majority. All right? You either consent to one ruler or decision of a majority. All right? In exchange for protection of the remaining rights or maintenance of the social order. So the social order depends upon the contractual agreement between the people and that which the rights that the people have that they have surrendered to that sovereign power, i.e., either that one person or that group or that majority. That's very important to understand based upon the social contract, based off the social order. Because if there's no social contract to maintain the social order, then you got what? Chaos. All right? You got chaos. The relation between natural and legal rights is often the topic of social contract theory. So social contract theory involves natural and legal rights based off the social order pertaining to those people in that contract based off the social contract. All right, your rights, your natural and legal rights based off the social contract between that which you surrender to those who are in authority, whether it's that natural person or that majority, depends upon the social order that society depends upon. Because if there is no social order based off the social contract that the people surrender to the majority or that sovereign, then you're going to have what? Chaos. And look, we surrender the power to the majority, and what you got? Chaos. Because that natural person or that sovereign or that minor or that crown is not there. That's the problem you have today. All right? Very, very, very important to understand that, for y'all to see that. The starting point for the most social contract theories is an examination of the human condition absent of any political order, termed the state of nature by Thomas Hobbes. In this condition, individual actions are bound only by their personal power and consciousness. From this shared starting point, social contract theory seeks to demonstrate why rational individuals with voluntary consent to give up their natural freedom to attain the benefit of political order. Okay? Political order. You got many people you can go to for your insight. Hugo de Groot, Thomas Hobbes, Samuel von Frithorf, John Locke, Jean Jacques Rousseau, Immanuel Kant. Well, we're going to go with Thomas Hobbes, all right? We're going to use him as our reference. All right. In the early days of the cosmic cycle, mankind lived on an immaterial plane. dancing on air and a sort of fairyland where there was no need of food or clothing and no private property, family, government, or law. Okay? So they dealing with the abstract or telling the story from outside of the sphere of where the story takes place. All right. This is the orbit of our government. Our government and its laws uh, has a continuous orbit. All right. Within this continuous sphere. All right. Everything outside of that sphere can interact with what's in that sphere. And in this case, this will be the natural law or God's law or the organic law. Okay. Because we know that God created the sphere and the orbit for which everything dealing with the United States and the government of the United States depends on. Okay? You must understand that. So in the early days of the cosmic cycle, mankind lived in an immaterial plane dancing on air and a sort of fairyland where there was no need of food or clothing and no private property, family, government, or law. So you're talking about, as I talked about my last lesson, going back to the cell lineage, back to your etheric cell, all right? Denoting by your DNA or your mitochondrial DNA, which is based upon your nuclear DNA, that outside of Earth spirit. Okay, we're not even dealing with the cosmic. We're talking about the concrete, dealing with the government. All right, within that sphere, we can't even deal with the cosmic until we deal with that sphere. But they taking us here, so let's deal with it. So then, gradually, the process of cosmic decay began its work, and mankind became earthbound and felt the need of food and shelter. As men lost their primordial glory, distinction of class arose, and they entered into agreement with one another, accepted the institution of private property and the family. With this theft, murder, adultery, and other crimes began. And so the people met together and decided to appoint one man from among them to maintain order in return for a share of the produce of their fields and herds. He was called the Great Chosen One, and he received the title of Raja because he pleased his people. So this is just pretty much talking about the monarch with the crown, okay? Talking about the House of Lords and who was king. Jesus was Lord of Lords and King of Kings, all right? We know our king was King Edgar the Peaceful, and he was the first king within his kingdom was peaceful. So that means that when we look at the cosmic story from a concrete abstract story, i.e. the cosmic story, and the concrete story, i.e. a government here on Earth, then we see the actual events actually taking place. All right, that the citizens, i.e. the subjects of that one who's been deemed the great chosen one, have surrendered some of their power for the greater of the whole. Okay, we must understand what's going on. So we're going to use that premises. So based upon that, let's go here. All right. This is case law to validate that. Once again, back to the case law. Crockett versus Sorensen. 1983 case. Crockett versus Sorensen, 1983 case. All right. So you're talking about cosmos, so you're talking about God creation. So that means that we must look at it from the biblical reference or the biblical illusions. All right. So we're going to use case law because we can't deal with the social contract from an abstract perspective, because we're still in the same condition that was told from the abstract, and we got no remedy. So we need a concrete story to validate the remedy that's going to come. All right, which we know based upon the Bible, because we see a Bible in the courtroom. All right, you can go right now in the courtroom and you see a Bible in that courtroom. All right, we know Thomas Jefferson separated church from state, but yet that Bible is in that courtroom. Okay, and we know that Bible is linked to either an abstract government or a concrete government. Okay, either abstract government or a concrete government. We know that God on earth is a concrete government that gives the social order its beginning. All right, we must understand that. So this is what we're associating the biblical illusions with in regards to our association with the so-called God, who is the ruler. Okay, it said our language and popular cultures are also replete with biblical illusions. The symbol of the American Medical Association, a staff with a serpent on it, is drawn from an episode in the Book of Numbers. Okay, all this dealing with the metaphysics or allegorical and etymology and all this other stuff. But we can't deal with that in regards to the social contract, in regards to the social order that was promised to us by our gods, all right, here on earth, not somewhere else. We're talking about here on earth. So it says the Book of Numbers, when Moses, at God's suggestion, raised a bronze serpent on a staff, and all the children of Israel who looked upon it were healed with a snake bite. The phrase handwriting on the wall comes from the passage in the book of Daniel, in which the handwriting on the wall foretold rough times ahead for Babylonian King Belshazzar. The popular phrases, the apple of my eye, is used in the Old Testament as one of God's descriptions for his people of Israel. And of course, the term Armageddon is the site where the battle will take place, which will mark the end of the age as described in the book of Revelation. Okay, now what's important about that? Because this is the abstract story. All right, we're still in Babylon. We're still in Armageddon. We are still suffering from the same description that we see the people of Israel are suffering from in that book. Okay, so you must not look at it from the abstract, but look at it in the concrete, because based off the concrete, it says Anglo-American law, as we know it today, is also heavily indebted to the principles and concepts found in the Bible. Okay. So that means that here in Anglo-America, i.e. the Anglosphere, the Bible has some reference not based off the church or the abstract belief, knowing that church and state was separated with Thomas Jefferson through the Religious Freedom Act, but we're associating the Bible with Anglo-American law, meaning that the law of the government, because the law of the government is governed by its constitution, all right? So that means that the Constitution of America should be based off the Constitution of English. That means the English Constitution, and we know America got a bunch of constitutions. So our Constitution, i.e. that instrument, that binding instrument that limits and gives the authority, is called the Magna Carta. Anglo-American law, as we know it today, is also heavily indebted to the principles concepts found in the Bible. William Blackstone, on one of the most influential figures in the development of the common law, explained the doctrine thus delivered we call the revealed or divine law, and they are to be found only in the Holy Scripture. Upon these foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation depends all human law. That is to say, no human law should be suffered to contradict these. Okay? So no law should be suffered to contradict the laws of the Anglo-Saxon origin. All right? Because it said Anglo-American law, all right, is indebted to the principles as found in the Bible, according to William Blackstone. And he said the doctrine thus delivered, we call the revealed or divine law. That means that if it's divine law, then the divine law should be the law that's applied to the government for God's people. And they are to be found only in the Holy Scriptures. Upon these foundations, the laws of nature and the laws of revelation depends all human laws. That is to say, no human law should be suffered to contradict these. So if there's a human law created, the human law must be uniform with that of the biblical law. We know that Anglo-American law and Anglo-Saxon law is one and the same. All right, because it's what? The common law of England. William Blackstone goes on to say, further, biblical influences pervade many specific areas of the law. The Good Samaritan laws used a phrase lift directly out of one of Jesus' parables. The concept of the fertile octogenarian applicable to the laws of wills and trusts is the large part derived from the book of Genesis, where we are told that Sarah, the wife of the patriarch Abraham, gave birth to Isaac when she was past age. In addition, the Ten Commandments have immeasurable effect on the Anglo-American legal development. Did you hear that? American legal development. So the Anglo-American legal development is based on Anglo-American biblical references. All right? Biblical references. We see it right here. All right, so let's go back. So we know that Anglo-American law is associated with God's law, i.e., the biblical law. We know the biblical law is not just what you read in that Bible, but the origin of where the Bible comes from and those who tamper with that Bible. And if you want to know that, you got to go back to the Anglo-Saxon origin. Okay? You must go back to Anglo-Saxon origin. All right? So let's go back to social contract. So social contract and moral or political philosophy. The social contract is an idea, theory, or model that usually, although not always, concerns the legitimacy of the authority of the state over the individual. Conceptualized in the age of enlightenment, it is the core concept of constitutionalism. While not necessarily conveyed and written down, it is the Constitutional Assembly written down in the Constituent Assembly and Constitution. All right. So that means that you have, if it's written down, that means it's a written law. If it ain't written down, that means it's some law that's not written. Okay. Means that it's something that's not known to everybody. Okay. The Constitution is the limitations of what those who are governed by that Constitution could do. We're gonna continue to qualify that. All right. Let's do that. So Leviathan. So we just dealt with social contract, right? All right, we just dealt with social contract. Let's go to Leviathan. All right. Leviathans are matters, forms, and powers of the Commonwealth, ecclesiastical, and civil, commonly referred to as Leviathan, which is a book written by Thomas Hobbes. Okay? Everybody needs to look that up. You see the same depiction. A book written by Thomas Hobbes and published in 1651. All right? It is name derived from the biblical Leviathan. Okay? So all those who look at it from the abstract, this is what you're going to get. A whole bunch of abstract stories. All right? A whole bunch of abstract stories. Nothing concrete. Nothing concrete. All dealing with myth, folklore, illusions. All written in the King James Bible. All right? For all those who look at it from a cosmic, abstract, spookism perspective. Okay? But we know King James was a king of England. All right? He was a monarch. He was a sovereign. Okay? So you must understand that side of the story as well. Because I always say, he who writes your books sets your timeline. And time never was when man was not. If the life of time and man begin, the time when man will be no more. All right? You know, man and Lord is two different things. We look in the Black Law Dictionary. Man was subject to the contract agreement made with the Anglo-Saxon lords. All right. Man was a vassal. All right. He was a tenant. He was a feudatory. Look it up in the Black Law Dictionary. All right. Then look up lordship. The lordship was the proprietor who had an interest in an estate. All right. So you can either take that abstract story and run with that, or you can take the concrete story that I'm giving you today and fix that social contract where you are a party to it. Let's go back here. Leviathan. From Thomas Hobbes' perspective. Commonwealth, ecclesiastical, and civil. Very important. I'm pretty sure all y'all might have came across this and it went right over your head. Commonly referred to as Leviathan is a book written by Thomas Hobbes and published in 1651. Okay? It is name derived from the biblical Leviathan. The work concerns the structure of society and legitimate government. It is regarded as one of the earliest, most influential examples of social contract theory, i.e., social compact theory. All right? Written during the English Civil War. Oliver Cromwell, y'all. The English Civil War. We know it says in United States versus Lee that the House of Stuart stripped the crown of its prerogative. So that means that the crown or the monarch who sits on the crown as a de jure officer was not there. So that means that it remained in what they call an interregnum. All right? An interregnum. All right? It said, written during the English Civil War, it argued for a social contract and ruled by an absolute sovereign. Hobbes wrote that civil war and the brute situation of a state of nature, the war of all against all, could be avoided only by a strong, undivided government. So an undivided government is a government that's ran by an absolute sovereign based off the social contract before the English Civil War took underway, right? Because the English Civil War was about who was going to be the absolute sovereign. So that ended in what we call a war of all against all. If you don't have a leader, you have nothing but chaos. That was going on because, like the sister said, we don't have any leaders to protect us. So guess what? It ain't, as far as we know, it ain't ours. He who has nothing can't give nothing. All right, so we must understand that we need to stop destroying it and take it back because it does belong to us. Why? Because based upon the social contract, we are the ones who created all this. We gave it to them. We don't have to play Monopoly anymore, okay? We can play chess. And when we play chess, there's only one player on the chess unless there's another person who's imposing on you based on what we call acquisition of sovereignty. Somebody acting as a sovereign and is not, okay? Acquisition of sovereignty, called prescription of sovereignty. That was done through what we call the War of the Roses. All right? Social contract theory. We're going to talk about this, y'all. Let's look at the front piece of that image we've seen on social contract as well as on body of politics. All right? Leviathan, social contract. We looked up social contract, all right. We already see the picture of Leviathan. We're looking up Leviathan now, and we see the picture of Leviathan. And it says here, we're talking about the front piece. So, in it, a giant crown figure is seen emerging from the landscape, clutching a sword and a crozier beneath a quote from Book of Job, non est potestas super terram quia comportier. There is no power on earth to be compared to him. Who? The sovereign. Okay? The sovereign. further linking the figure to the monster of the book, due to the disagreement over the precise location of the chapters and verses when they were divided in the late Middle Ages. The verse Hobbes quoted is usually given as Job 41, chapter 41, verse 33. In modern Christian translation in English, Job 41, verse 25, chapter 41, verse 25, in the Masoretic text, the Septuagint, in the Luther Bible, it is Job chapter 41, verse 24 in the Vulgate. The torso and the arms of the figures are composed of over 300 persons. And the style of Giuseppe Quasimodo, all are facing away from the viewer. So if you're viewing that, it means that what you're viewing, the people, they're not looking at you, they're looking at the saw, okay? With just the giant head having visible facial features. A manuscript of Leviathan created by Charles II in 1651. Who is this Charles II? King of England. We know after restoration of the crown, all the land charges were given to who? Duke of York, to George Carteret and George Berkeley, which were surrendered back to the crown. So they're talking about Leviathan was created for Charles II, the House of Stuart, from the House of Stuart, who severed the priority of the crown. Charles II, going all the way back to the English Civil War with Oliver Cromwell, they all was fighting over the English throne. All right. It says, a manuscript of Leviathan created for Charles II in 1651 had notable differences. A different main head, but significantly a body is also composed of many faces, all looking outward from the body and with a range of expression. So that's where he got his from. The lower portion is a triptych framed in wooden border. The center form contains the title on an ornate curtain. The two sides reflect the sword and enclosure of the main figure, earthly power on the left and the power of the church on the right. Okay? Earthly power on the left and the church power on the right. So this is a church government. A fusion of power of government aligned with the church, which Thomas Jefferson separated with the Religious Freedom Act. Okay? Now, we know the First Amendment protects church government contrast to the secular government, okay? State government. Each side element reflects the equivalent power: a castle to the church, crown to a mitre, cannon to excommunication, weapons to logic, and the battlefield to a religious court. The giant holds the symbol of both sides, reflecting the union of secular and spiritual, i.e., temporal and spiritual, and the sovereign, but the constructor of the torso also makes the figure the state. Okay? When you go down a little further, it breaks down all the parts together, but for the sake of time, we're not going to go through that. So it shows you the difference between the temporal and the spiritual, the state and the church. We know that under the monarch, there was no separation of church and state. There was a fusion of power. Okay? The executive and legislative represent the king and parliament, and the king and the judiciary represent the king's bench. All right? We must understand in order to understand the social contract that has been broken. All right? That's the reason why there is no social order for us as people identify as Negro, Black, colored Ethiopian. You must identify yourself as Anglo-Saxon, because Anglo-Saxon, as Frederick Douglass said, is your paternity. All right? That gave his freedom, and it will give you yours. All right? He got his without even having a minor at the time. But the crown gave him, and the people who were factually sitting on the crown freed him. They paid for that man freedom. Okay? Let's get to it. So we went through social contract and Leviathan, which all deals with the maintaining of the social order that we have now, which is not the social order that we want. All right? This social order that they have now is an all-out war, right? Because we don't have no people to protect us, no representatives to protect us. All right? So that's a violation because the contract has been broken. It's called an unconscionable contract. An unconscionable contract based off the original contract that was agreed upon between the parties of the contract, based upon the body of politics. All right? Based upon the body of politics. What is the body of politics that the contract was based upon? Let's see. Body politics. Everybody pull it up. Everybody pull it up. Body politics. The body of politics is a polity such as a city, rim, or state. Did you hear that? A polity is such as a city, rim, or state. This is called a municipality. Considered metaphorically as a physical body. All right. Brother Hopkins, I don't get what you mean. I'm number two. What does that mean, my brother? Last video you put I am number three. I don't understand that language. Please clarify. The body of politics is a polity such as a city, rim, or state, considered metaphorically as a physical body. Historically, the sovereign is typically portrayed as the body's head, and the analogy may also be extended to other anatomical parts as the political reading of Aesop's fable, The Belly and Its Members. Oh, okay, my brother. All right, we see the same depiction here. All right, we see Leviathan. Right, you see the castle, the church, the crown, the myrtle. War, what it says, what was the other one that says, let me go back there. Weapons, logic, battlefield, religion. So weapons, logic, okay? Notice got lightning bolt, information, consciousness, all right? Let's go here. So body of politics, oh, let me go back there. The belly and its members. In Latin Europe, the body politic took on a jurisprudential significance by being identified with the legal theory of a corporation. Everybody hear that? The Latin Europe, the body politic took on a jurisprudential significance by being identified with the legal theory of a corporation, gaining salience in political thought from the 13th century on. In English law, the image of the body politic developed into the theory of the king's two bodies, the crown and the corporation soul. Yes, Brother Hopkins. Yes, sir. So you definitely should be listening to this one. All right. So jurisprudential significance, it was identified with a corporation. Okay. What is jurisprudential? Jurisprudence is the philosophy and theory of the law. It is concerned primarily with what the law is and what it ought to be. That includes questions of how persons and social relations are understood in legal terms, and of value and of the values in and of law. Work that is counted as jurisprudence is mostly philosophical, but it includes work that also belongs to other disciplines such as sociology, history, politics, and economics. Okay, so jurisprudence deals with everything we need to in regards to fixing our problem. All right, so if that is the case, then as they just said, that it took on the jurisprudence identity as the form of what we call a corporation. All right, the term of a corporation, and that corporation was called the crown. Okay, the crown, corporation soul, and the crown or the king or the monarch are synonymous. You can't mean one without meaning the other. Okay? You must understand that. The corporation soul is the crown. The crown as the corporation soul. All right? Let's get there. Let's go there. All right? The crown as corporation soul. Check this out. Case law. Everybody see this? County of St. Louis, Oppiso versus Osher, 1983 case, appellate court. All right, an appellate court. Everybody pull that up if you can. This is 1983. All right. This is jurisprudence we're talking about. In 1983. Everybody listen. The corporation soul is a venerable creation of the common law of England. It is well established under the common law in California. Did y'all hear that? California, by statute, has legitimized this tradition and regulated the formalities attendant upon the creation and continued existence of the corporation soul. Our principal purpose of the corporation soul is to ensure the continuation of ownership of property dedicated to the benefit of the religious organization, which may be held in the name of its titular head, i.e., its trustee, its officer. Title will not then be divested or passed to that person's heir upon his death, but will retain for the benefit of the religious group and pass to the successor to his office. Did y'all hear that? His office. The topic was covered by Blackstone, who describes the corporation soul as follows. Corporation souls consist of one person only and his successors. Did y'all hear that? In some particular station, who as incorporated by law in order to give them some legal capacity and advantages, particularly that of the perpetuity, which is in the nature of persons they could not have, that they could not have. They cannot have. In this sense, the king is a sole corporation. So is the bishop, so are some deans and prebendaries, distinct from their several chapters, and so is every person in Vicar, and the necessity, or at least use of this institution will be very apparent if we consider the case of the parson of a church. At the original endowment of a parish church is the freedom of the church, the churchyard, and the parson's house. The glebe and the tithes of the parish were vested in the were vested in the then parson by the bounty of the donor as a temporal recompense to him for his spiritual care of the inhabitants, and with the intent that the same emulance should ever afterward continue as a recompense for the same care. But how was this to be effected? The freehold was vested in the parson, and if we suppose it's vested in natural capacity on his death, it might descend to his heirs and would be liable to his debt and encumbrances, or at best, the heir might be compellable at some trouble and expense to convey these rights to succeeding incumbent. The law, therefore, has wisely ordained that the parson, quantis as parson, shall never die, and any more than the king, by making him his successors a corporation, by which means all the original rights of the parsonage are preserved entire to the successor. For the present incumbent and his predecessors who lived 7 centuries ago and are in law one of the same person, and what was given to one was given to the other also. Blackstone's commentary. Do y'all hear that, y'all? Did y'all hear that? So there is such thing as a corporation. So, and there's all those who assume the authority of the corporation, so i.e. the crown. And we know that the Stuart crowns severed the prerogatives of the crown. Let me just pull that up so we can qualify that, so we won't have no questions about that. United States versus Lake. Anybody see that? United States versus Lake. Let's just get this first thing correct right here. So you want to establish that distorts, sever the prerogatives of the crown. That's what we first want to establish. In this case. That's 17, page 17. Page 17. Yeah. Here it is. Let's see. Y'all bear with me. Just look it up. Okay, here we go. Everybody see that? Page 17. This is United States versus Lee. 1882 case. United States versus Lee. Page 17. It states here, for the record, in all cases where the title to property came into controversy, because like the sister said, we don't own nothing, all right? How could we be protected based off the social contract involving us if we don't own us? Every time we own something, they burn it down. Why? Because the laws that dictate they have the authority to do so. They the law. All right. So if you don't have no law to protect you, then you don't have no say so in regards to what goes down under the protection of the law. Okay. That means that you're not a part of the social order. That means you're a part of the chaos that's happening. All right. As you can see displayed on the screen. It said in all cases where the title to property came into controversy between the crown and a subject, whether held in right of a person who was king or as representative of the nation, body of politics, the social contract. Remember, you got either righteousness or unjust. We got righteousness and corruptness. All right, you got good and bad, right and wrong. Okay, so all things dealing with your right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness depends upon this case. All right? It depends upon this case. In all cases where the title of property came to controversy between the crown and his subjects, the corporation sold and his subjects. All right? Thomas Hobbes said, if you ain't got the crown or the king there, then that means that it's an all against all. And you're not even included in the all, because everything that all is taken belongs to you. Whether held in right of the person who was the king or the representative of the nation, the petition of right presented a judicial remedy, a remedy which this court, on full examination in case which required it, held to be practical and efficient. There has been therefore no necessity for suing the officers or servants of the king who held possession of such property when the issue could be made with the king himself as a defendant. Y'all opt out of that, all right? You chose not to have a monarchy. Another reason of much greater weight is found in the vast differences in the essential character of the two governments as regards to the source of the depository of power. Remember that word, character. The essential character of the government. The essential character of the government determines the social order, the essential characters of it. Notwithstanding the progress which has been made since the days the Stuarts, the kings and queens of the house of Stuarts, who got their authority from the house of Tudors under Henry VIII and Henry VII, who established the Church of England, i.e., the Church of England. The Roman Catholic Church of England, who now became Protestant churches, which majority of our English people now call black people are associated with those churches. Whether you don't go to them or you do go to them, I'm pretty sure when you was a child, you got a birth certificate from either them or you got a birth certificate from the state. And we know that the state or the municipality is run by its local chapel. All right. Yes, you're subject to the archdiocese that governs that jurisdiction within that municipality. All right, because you're under the Roman Catholic Church, because the powers of the crown has been stripped by the monarch of Stuart. They left it in place. There just was no king there to revive it. Okay, you must understand this. Why? Because the essential characters of the government that protects English nationals, Anglo-Saxon Berbers, are still here, but you choose not to be Anglo-Saxon Berbers. All right? So to be black has an essential character. To be white has an essential character. To be a naturalized citizen has an essential character. To be a foreigner has an essential character. To be a colonist has an essential character. To be a citizen of the state has an essential character. To be an English Anglo-Saxon Berber has an essential character. Very, 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 very important, because it's protected by those who have Anglo-Saxon descent, Anglo-American law, where the abstract and the concrete becomes one. All right? You must understand that. If you don't by the time this lesson, you hear this lesson, you never will. Protestant, Protestant, whatever you call it, it don't matter. Okay? We know that that's how we were separated from the English church. Okay? You had the English Reformation by Henry VIII and what was it, 1483. Don't quote me. I got a lot of stuff in here, so a lot of dates. But the English Reformation was done by Henry VIII. The crown was subverted by Henry VII through what we call right of conquest. All right? Right of conquest was a result of us fighting amongst ourselves as descendants, heirs of the Plantagenet crown. Okay? We know that relationship between the Plantagenet crown goes all the way back to the relationship with the kings of Wessex, back to the English Benedictine Reformation, which was the reformation of the English church again as a result of the Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons back in the 5th century by Pope Gregory XIII, by Pope Gregory I under Augustine of Canterbury under the authority of Pope Gregory I. All right? All the Anglo-Saxon Berbers were converted to Christianity, which is now called this Protestant faith that you have now. All right, that was instituted and promulgated by what we call the Church of England, and separated by Thomas Jefferson through the Religious Freedom Act. All right, so when they separated church and state, they gave you an abstract and separated the actual political government, i.e., the body of politics, i.e., the social contract that relates to you as an Anglo-Saxon English descendant. All right, very important for you to understand that. Essential character. Remember that word, essential character. Why do I say that? Let's revisit this. All right. All case law, y'all. All case law to validate this. We know the Stuart stripped the crown. All right. The crown is the crown's prerogative, the king's prerogative, right? In order for a prerogative of the crown or the king is a petition, a right. When you go to courts, when you don't like a decision in your your local courts, then you have the right to an appeal, right? A right to petition. Those petitions are the prerogatives of the king. Writ of mandamus, habeas corpus, court warranto, writ of circulator, writ of prohibition. All these are those rights that belong to the king. They part of it is what they call jure regalia. Jure regalia. Okay? Let's go here. First of all, let's get the basis of this government. Okay? The foundation of this government we call American government is based upon Anglo-Saxon principles. All right? Let's see. We said the body of politics took on jurisprudence in the 13th century. All right? And jurisprudence deals with law. All right? So this is case law. United States Supreme Court, 1904, Kepner versus United States. Kepner versus United States. (1904). This is the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. De facto, that is. The highest court in the land is New Jersey Supreme Court. That's the King's Bench, my court. Okay? Page 26. This is what Chief Judge Brown said. The argument is irrelevant. When they say something about Anglo-Saxon, they make sure they slave it to the last end, to the very end. They stick it in there somewhere. All right? We're dealing with the social order. All right? Social order is determined by the judiciary. All right? Because social order is something that upheld. When it's broken, that means if the social order has been broken, that means the law has been broken. All right? That's a legislative. So that means that we're supposed to be executing what the law says. If we don't execute what the law says, then we don't have the right to protection of the law. We're not doing what the law says. So we have no protection of the law. Chief Judge Brown says in his dissent, under our Anglo-Saxon system of jurisprudence, I have always supposed that a verdict of acquittal upon a valid indictment terminated the jeopardy, that no further proceedings for a review could be taken either in the same or in the appellate court, and that it was extremely doubtful whether even Congress can constitutionally authorize such review. You hear that? They lack the authority to review anything based off origin of jurisprudence going back to Anglo-Saxon. Why? Because it must be based off the common law of England. All right, you have it right there. He said the system of government based upon jurisprudence is Anglo-Saxon system of law. We read that the Bible was based upon Anglo-Saxon system of law in lieu of what we call jurisprudence. All right? Two case laws to validate that, based upon the body of politics, based upon the social contract, which keeps the social order. For us, all right? For us, we don't have no social order because the only people I see majority in those videos was us. Was us in those videos. Thank you for that analysis, Brother Hopkins. So you see, it's the Anglo-Saxon system of jurisprudence that we as a people must depend on. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? Let's get into it. This is the focal point of the lesson. United States Supreme Court, 1901, Downs versus Bedell. Nationality is the key. Nation is the key. To not be associated with a nation, i.e. government, then you have no protection in regards to the social order that protects you. Very, very important. I'm going to show you with this case. I'll tell you what I mean. Essential character. You heard what I said. The essential character of this government is supposed to be Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. You got the Bible in the courtroom, and Anglo-Saxon law, based off the biblical understanding, is rooted in jurisprudence, which Chief Justice Brown said this government is rooted in Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, which must be the essential character of this government, right? It must be the essential character of this government, but the character of the government has dropped from review. Why? Because we're no longer in existence until this day. All right, to this day. There's a clear distinction between such prohibitions of the writ of prohibition. That's a petition, that's a prerogative of the crown. There is a clear distinction between such prohibitions of the Constitution as go to the very root of the power of Congress to act at all, irrespective of time or place, and such as are operative only throughout the United States or among the several states. A long, continued, and uniform interpretation put to the executive and legislative department of the government upon a clause in the Constitution should be followed by the judicial department unless such interpretation be manifestly contrary to its letter or spirit. So it must be based off the common law. We know the common law is not law that's written down. That's called statute. Common law is the law that's in use before it was written down. All right? So the long continuing practice of the jurisprudence of the Anglo-Saxon law is based upon, that was based upon, dictated by the legislative. In this case, it will be Parliament. Okay? Then executed by who? The executive department. The executive department in Parliament is one and the same because it's called the King in Parliament. Okay? King in Parliament. The King in this council. A long, continued uniform interpretation put by the executive and legislative department of the government upon a clause in the Constitution to be followed by the judicial department unless such interpretation be manifestly contrary to the letter of the spirit. So that means that all judges must follow the letter of their Constitution. The Constitution, as a charter, is the instrument of limitations. We must understand it. It's an instrument of limitations based upon Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. No other. Not Morse American, not Native American, not Jewish, not Hebrew, none of that. Anglo-Saxon, from a concrete perspective, that is. Religious freedom is free, it's based upon the First Amendment, but your religious freedom doesn't associate with any polity or body politics. A social contract is based off of abstract body politics or social contract with some spook who have yet to manifest that body politics here on earth. All right? We must understand what's going on. The government of the United States was born of the Constitution, that's their birth certificate, and all power which it enjoys or may exercise must be either derived expressly or by implication from that instrument. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Ever then, when a act of any department is challenged because not warranted by the Constitution, the existence of the authority is to be ascertained by the determining whether the power has been conferred by the Constitution. Okay? Either in express terms or by lawful implication, to be drawn from the express authority conferred or deduced as an attribute which legitimately inherits in the nature of the power given, and which flows from the character, hear that word, character, of the government established by the Constitution. In other words, while it's confined to its constitutional orbit, the government of the United States is supreme within its lawful sphere. So that means that whatever they do within their sphere, based upon their government that determines their orbit, is okay for them. But you didn't come from their orbit within their constitutional sphere because it's not based upon your social order. Hell, ether keeps all the planets in order. It's what made up what we talked about, the electromagnetic field. All right? Every function of the government being thus derived from the Constitution, it follows that that instrument is everywhere and at all times potential insofar as provisions are applicable. Okay? We must understand that. We must understand that. Why do I say that? We understand the essential character of this government, and based upon the government of the government and the laws governing that orbit is based upon its sphere. Okay? Its sphere. Essential character of its government is based upon its orbit, based upon its sphere or its limitations, all right? Its boundaries. The Constitution sets its boundaries, okay? We must understand that. The Constitution has undoubtedly conferred on Congress the right to create such municipal organizations as it may be deemed best for all the territories of the United States, whether they have been incorporated or not, to give to the inhabitants as respect the local government such degree of representation as may be conducted to the public well-being, to deprive such territory of representative government if it is considered just to do so, and to change such local government as discretion. Did you hear what it just said, y'all? Did you hear what it just said? So this is exactly what's going on based off what they just said in this case law, because it's not based off Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, all right? Because we got our own orbit. We have our own sphere. We got our own circle. We got our own society. We got our own group of people that we affiliate with. First, and furthermore, before we communicate do business with somebody else, because that will be an unlawful contract to contract somebody else other than the original creditor. All right? Check it out. Chief Justice Cheney in Scott versus Sanford is unwarranted. Whatever may be the view entertained of the correctness of the opinion of the court, in that case, insofar as interpreted a particular provision of the Constitution concerning slavery and decided that as so construed, it was enforced in the territory. This is no way affect the principles which that decision announced, that the applicable provisions of the Constitution were operative. Did you hear that? Chief Justice Cheney clearly just said that it was legislatively authorized for them to be able to practice slavery. Article 1, Section 9, through what we call migration, right? And they're able to tax you, all right? All citizens who migrate through immigration, all right? They can't deal with it on an international level, but on a national level, they can, because it's called domestic slavery. That was the whole Civil War is about over here. War of slavery. In the case of the territory as in every other instance, when a provision of the Constitution is invoked, the question which arises is not whether the Constitution is operative, for that is self-evident, but whether the provisions relied on is applicable. As Congress derives its authority to levy local taxes for local purposes within the territories, not from the general grant of power to tax as expressed in the Constitution, it follows that its rights to locally tax is not to be measured by the provisions of power in Congress to lay and collect tax duties imposed and exercised. It is not restrained by the requirements of the uniformity throughout the United States. Did you hear this? In conquered territories, civil government must take effect either by the action of treaty-making power or by that of Congress of the United States. The office of treaty of cession ordinarily is to put an end to all the authority of foreign government over the territory and subject the territory to the disposition of the government of the United States. I'll read it again. Moderators, do not continue on that conversation. Let Brother Hopkins be on his way. All right? Stay on the class, stay on the mission. The government and disposition of the territory so acquired belong to the government of the United States, consisting of the President and Senate, elected by the state and the House of Representatives, chosen by the immediately representing the people of the United States. So you hear this? Did you hear this, y'all? Archbishop Countess cease and desist from communication. Here, we say, in a conquered territory, civil government must take effect either by the action of treaty-making power or by that of Congress of the United States. The office of a treaty of secession ordinarily is to put an end to all authority of foreign government over the territory and to subject the territory to the disposition of the government of the United States. All right, let's look up acquisition of sovereignty real quick. No apologies needed. Even the language Brother Hopkins is using is unfamiliar. TY folks. Come on, man, speak English. That's the reason why you're in this problem. Listen very close. Brother Hopkins, you can continue to watch, but this is just for observation. All right? This is just for observation. If you disagree with what's being said, you have to go on your way. All right? But apparently you've been logging on this channel as a result of what's being taught here. So if you want to be enlightened, be enlightened. If you don't want to be enlightened, continue to move forward. A number of methods of acquisition of sovereignty are or have been recognized by international law as lawful methods by which a state may acquire sovereignty or territory. All right? International law adopts much of Roman property law. You hear that? International law or Roman property law are one and the same because it's all based upon acquisition of sovereignty. All right? They don't own anything. Anything they have, they take it. they take it. All right. And it started with what? The right of discovery. Right? It says Roman property law and international law are one and the same in regards to acquisition of sovereignty due to the underlying European civil law at the time. All right, of the early discovery voyages such as Christopher Columbus. The basis of acquisition of state ownership of vacant territory therefore continues to apply. It was often applied historically to land already possessed by indigenous population. So who are the indigenous people? They talk about the indigenous population. They are the English. They are the English. Because the English didn't have to colonize anything. They were already home. They're already home. So the only way through prescription of sovereignty, somebody claiming to be the sovereign can take land by what we call succession is through accession, succession, conquest, effective occupation, and prescription. You see that? Prescription. We talked about this all day long. Prescription. Effective occupation. Conquest, cession, accretion. All right, so let's go back to the case law. So we're talking about acquisition of sovereignty. All right, this is what we're talking about. In a conquered territory, civil government must take effect either by way of actions of treaty-making powers or by that of the Congress of the United States. When you made a treaty on the law of Congress or law of discovery, it wasn't on no land because you took the land. So whatever treaty you made was a treaty made in law, what we call admiralty law, because you wasn't using the law of nature, because the law of nature is the law of what we call air, ether. All right? So you either did it under admiralty, the law of water, you got land, air, and water. All right? You did it on water, that's admiralty. That's the law dealing with the laws made with treaties. All right? If you made a treaty on land, contrary to the law of the land, then that treaty becomes null and void. All right? And we know the law dealing with the treaties on the territory conquered by way of succession, by way of what we call law, the laws of discovery, is a violation of the laws of the land, because as we said, Chief Justice Brown said, the laws of this land is based off the jurisprudence of Anglo-Saxon law, going back to biblical law, all right? In a conquered territory, civil government must take effect either by action of treaty-making power or by that of the Congress of the United States. The office of a treaty of secession ordinarily is to put an end to all authority of the foreign government over the territory and to subject the territory to the disposition of the government of the United States. The government and disposition of the territory so acquired belongs to the government of the United States, consisting of the president, the Senate, elected by the states, and the House of Representatives, chosen by the immediately representing the people of the United States. Okay? So long as Congress has not incorporated the territories into the United States, neither military occupation nor secession by treaty makes the conquered territory domestic territory in the sense of revenue law. But these laws concerning foreign countries remain applicable to the conquered territories until changed by Congress. So all the so-called treaties you made based upon the laws, based upon the agreements you made, i.e. the social contracts, are null and void because the territory that you acquired was by way of what we call secession. And it just says here, so long as Congress has not incorporated the territories into the United States, neither military occupation nor secession by treaty makes the conquered territory domestic territory. So meaning that it don't belong to them, especially in regards to raising revenue, because the only revenue that the territories called the United States, i.e. the Confederation of the Continental Congo, was based off domestic trade, not international trade, because if that was the case, it would automatically go back to the Crown, because the Crown gets first dibs on all creditors. All creditors and all debtors, because the Crown is the creditor. Crown Act 1541. Everybody pull that up when you got time. If Congress is not ready to construct a complete government for the conquered territory, it may establish a temporary government which is not subject to all the restrictions of the Constitution. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? So that means that in regards to the territory that was ceded and the property associated with the territory that was ceded to them, you were included as Dred Scott clearly said. You were not a citizen because you were property at that particular time. Frederick Douglass found that out the hard way. You're going to find out the hard way if you don't listen to what I'm telling you. Why do I say that? Let's go ahead. Worst case. Same case, y'all. Okay, yeah, there we go. 272. All this is in my head, so y'all got to give me time. So we know Chief Brown said this Anglo-Saxon system is based upon the jurisprudence of the Anglo-Saxon law. $372. Where is it at? You know, case for case. All right here. We're just gonna go to go here. 3. Come right to the meat. And we're still talking about social order, social contract, social compact, which is nothing more than the body of politics, which is a relationship with the people's relationship with their government. If it's ran by a collective, majority, or by one individual, i.e. a minority. That's what it's all about. If it's neither, if it's it, John Thomas Hobbes said that if it's not the monarch, then you pretty much screwed, right? Because we know we at Anglo-Saxon Berbers, this is not our body of politics. What we see is in this case, it says it's based upon our jurisprudence, but we don't know our jurisprudence. All right, we don't know our jurisprudence. All right, we know that Dred Scott, as they mentioned in this case, was not considered a citizen of the United States. We know the United States has an essential character based upon its laws that govern its government based upon its its orbit within the sphere. All right, so let's look what it should be for us as Anglo-Saxon heirs and successors, based upon the law of jurisprudence. Contrast to their law, which is not Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. Okay, right here. Same case. Although from the foundation of the government, this court has held steadily to the view that the government of the United States was one of enumerated powers, and that not one of its branches, nor all of its branches combined could constitutionally exercise power not granted, or which were not necessarily implied from those expressly granted. Y'all better listen. I took my time to find this. Yes, Chief Brown. He broke it down for us. He said, although from the foundation of the government, this court has held steadily to the view that the government of the United States was one of the enumerated powers, and that no one branch of its branches, no one of its branches, no all of its branches combined could constitutionally exercise power not granted, or which were not necessarily implied from those expressly granted. We are now informed that Congress possesses power outside of the Constitution and may deal with new territory acquired by treaty or conquest, in the same manner as other nations have been accustomed to act with respect to the territories acquired by them. In my opinion, Congress has no existence and can exercise no authority outside of the Constitution. Now, he said they did by right of conquest. Didn't he say that, y'all? Listen, y'all. He said, we are now informed that Congress possess power outside of the Constitution and may deal with new territories acquired by treaty or conquest. Same thing Dred Scott is saying, all right? Treaty or conquest, in the same manner as other nations have been accustomed to act with respect to territories acquired by them. In my opinion, Congress has no existence and can exercise no authority outside of the Constitution. Still less is true that Congress can deal with new. Still less is it true that Congress can deal with new territory just as other nations have done or may do with their new territory. This nation is under the control of a written constitution, the supreme law of the land, and the only source of power which our government or any branch of officers of it may exert at any time or at any place. Monarchical and despotic governments unrestrained by written constitutions may do with newly acquired territories what this government may not do consistently with our fundamental laws. Did you hear that? Monarchical and despotic governments unrestrained by written constitutions may do with newly acquired territories what this government may not do consistently with our fundamental laws. To say otherwise is to concede that Congress may, by action, take outside of the Constitution and graft it upon our republican institution as colonial systems such as existed under the monarchical government. Did you hear this? Did y'all hear this language? Surely such a result was never contemplated by the fathers of the Constitution. If that instrument had contained a word suggesting the possibility of a result of that character, it would never have been adopted by the people of the United States. Did you hear that, y'all? Did y'all hear that? These are English people talking, and the spirit of the English people. The idea that this country may acquire territories anywhere upon the earth by Congress or treaty and hold them as mere colonies or provinces, the people inhabiting them to enjoy only such rights as Congress choose to accord to them, is wholly inconsistent with the spirit and the geniuses as well as with the words of the Constitution. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? The idea prevails with some, indeed, is found expressions in arguments at the bar that we have in this country substantially or practically two national governments, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. Did you hear that? So Congress should not be subject to the instrument, i.e. the Constitution. It should have its authority outside of that instrument, i.e. that Constitution, and that will only be king and parliament. All right? King and parliament. Because it just said the monarchies should not be subject and not be restrained to that prerogatives and priorities that they're mentioning right here, based upon that which was sanctioned by the Constitution governing the United States or the Confederate States and all those that were gained by secession. It says here, the idea prevails. The idea prevails with some, indeed, is found expressions in argument at the bar that we have in this country substantially or practically two national governments, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, and the other to be maintained by Congress outside independently of that instrument by exercising such power as other nations of earth are accustomed to exercise. They're talking about king and parliament, y'all. King and parliament. All right? King and parliament. It is one thing to give such a latitudinarian construction to Constitution as will bring the exercise of power by Congress upon a particular occasion or upon a particular subject within its provisions. It is quite a different thing to say that Congress may, if so elect, proceed outside of its Constitution. The glory of our American system of government is that it was created by a written constitution which protects the people against the exercise of arbitrary, unlimited power, and the limit of which instrument may not be passed by the government is created, or by any branch of it, or even by the people who ordain it, except by the amendment or change of its provisions. To what purpose? Chief Judge Marshall said in Marbury versus Madison, all powers, limits, and to what purpose is the limitations committed to writing. If these limits may at any time be passed by those intended to be restrained, the distinction between a government with limited and unlimited power is abolished, and those limited to, if those limits to do so confine those persons on whom they are imposed, and if acts prohibited and acts allowed are of equal obligation. Let me read that again. It says, are powers limited, and to what purpose is that limitation committed to writing? If these limits may at any time be passed by those intended to be restrained, the distinction between a government with limited and unlimited powers is abolished if those limits do not confine the persons on whom they are imposed, and if acts prohibited and acts allowed are of equal obligation. The wise men who framed the Constitution and the patriotic people who adopted it were unwilling to depend for their safety upon what the opinion refers to is described as certain principles of natural justice inherited in Anglo-Saxon character, which need no expression in constitution or statutes to give them effect or to secure dependency against legislation manifestly hostile to their real interests. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that, y'all? The wise men who framed the Constitution and the patriotic people who adopted it were unwilling to depend for their safety upon what, in the opinion referred to, is described as certain principles of natural justice inherited in Anglo-Saxon character, which need no expression in constitutions or statutes to give them effect, or to secure dependencies against legislation manifestly hostile to their real interests. Did y'all hear that? Somebody better give me applause. Somebody better give me an applause. All right, you like that? Check this out. So we know that the Anglo-Saxons, as they stated, where we at? Certain principles of natural justice inherited in Anglo-Saxon character don't need no expression that was established in the Constitution or statute to give them effect or to secure dependency against the legislation manifestly hostile to their real interests, contrast to the wise men who framed the Constitution and the patriotic people who adopted it, who were unwilling to depend for their safety upon what, in the opinion, referred to and described as the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. All right? Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. And we know the Anglo-Saxon were the English people. So let's get a depiction of these color of their skin in regards to this citizenship. Because under the Naturalization Act of 1790, the so-called black people couldn't be citizens as described in the Naturalization Act of 1790. All right. The only way they could be citizens is based off their emancipation in the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, which gave them the right to be classified as citizens, but not having the same right as those as the white patriotic people we see described in this case law, based upon the description we've seen in that social contract that has been broken for people identified as black people, because you see the hell that's going on with black people as a result of the social contract not being honored. You see it. All right. So let's address this citizenship status once and for all. Okay? Once for all. Yes, you are, Brother Hopkins. You are Anglo-Saxon. I keep telling you, brother. You can be whatever you want. That's your choice. That's your choice. If you want to choose a color, take your pick, because a lot of colors. And we know that black people don't have any rights other than that was established for the 14th Amendment. You can classify yourself with a society all day long, but where's the body of politics associated with that society? All right? Because we know that us as Anglo-Saxons, the society North America is founded on is Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. That the founding fathers or the patriotic people who adopted the Constitution, which is their limitations, adopted for themselves. That we don't have to adopt because we don't need a Constitution because we are limitless. We are limitless. Okay. So we know based off the Naturalization Act of Arab trying to be classified as a white person in lieu of citizenship under the Naturalization Act of 1790 as described by the statute. We know the statute or the administrative act that was created by act of the legislation is confined by its constitution. All right? But it stepped outside of that sphere. All right? It stepped outside of that sphere and started playing God. All right? Took on a new orbit of his own. Now it's crashing everybody else stuff. You see conquest all over the place. And who's at the hill of it, the hem of it? Because this ain't the law of the land, this is the law of the seas. Because this stuff's happening across seas. Yes, you're overstanding. All right, give me a second, y'all. So as we can see, those founding fathers or patriotic did not depend upon the Anglo-Saxon character, the essential characters of the Anglo-Saxon, which Chief Judge Brown said it was their jurisprudence that they depended on. So that means that they ain't practicing the jurisprudence of Anglo-Saxon law. They're practicing the law that they wanted to practice, all right? Because it just said they dared not to practice the character of the Anglo-Saxon, which didn't depend upon the Constitution, because the law that they had was the common law that was already there before they got there. That was the common law then, all right? It says here in Ray versus Hassan in regards to citizenship. Now, this is the Arab trying to get citizenship under the Nationalist Act of 1790. We're not even talking about the Chinese or dark white skinned, light skinned Chinese or Japanese or dark skinned Anglo-Saxon. All right, we're talking about a Arab. In summary, it says to summarize the approach, which I constantly go over this case all over again. Those who were in that video we played prior to this lesson should go and review this case. To summarize the approach which must be followed in deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the statute as interpreted by the Supreme Court, it is necessary to determine further the particular groups of racial subdivisions to which the individual belongs and practice affects individual belongs. Now, we know that case was written by the Supreme Court. All right, in regards to the citizenship of the government and the limitations of the government as dictated by its constitution, which limited black people, all right? And limited everybody else, no matter what color you was, because they were the supreme rulers of that land. They were gods inside their spirit, okay? So it said that Supreme Court found it necessary to determine first a particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. In practical effects, proof of this fact is a matter of genealogy. Anglo-Saxon is a genealogy, all right? An individual who presents an aberration from the color of skin of the group of which he is a member, such as a light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon. It didn't say light-skinned. It didn't say yellow, or it said dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon does not thereby acquire a different status under the act from other members of the group. So right there, brother Hopkins, you can agree that as a black person, you will fit under the terminology as the case author said, as a dark-skinned person for your citizenship would be that of Anglo-Saxon. And if you recognize that, then you're going to be recognized by the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, which is the law that protects you from the legislation that's contrary to that Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence. All right? By a petition of right. Of course, when an individual applying for citizenship, so now you need to ask yourself, do you want to be a citizen of the United States or the States, or do you want to be a citizen of England? All right, that's the question you got to ask yourself. That's the question everyone must ask themselves based upon the theory of body of politics, social contract. You know what I'm saying? It all depends upon the crown or the corporation so leading you or a majority of people leading you, because it all involves you giving up certain rights for certain privileges. All right, that's the way the game goes. Okay. All right. So it says you light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon does not thereby acquire a different status under the act for the other members of his group. So that's why you just heard them say in this case law that the patriotic people didn't dare try to base their identity based off Anglo-Saxon essential characters. They dared not to do that. Where is that at? Right here. Look at that. The wise men who framed the Constitution and the patriotic people who adopted it were unwilling to depend for their safety upon what, in the opinion referred to, is described as certain principles of natural justice inherited in Anglo-Saxon characters, which need no expression in constitution or statutes to give them effect or to secure dependency against legislation manifestly hostile to their own interests. Man, that right there, boy, man, those right there are bombs. Those are bombs being dropped. Okay, bombs being dropped. So just because you say you Anglo-Saxon, you got to prove it to me. All right? Just because you got this color skin don't mean you Anglo-Saxon descent. All right? Very, 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 very important. All right, let's continue. An individual who presents aberration from the color skin of the group of which he is a member, such as a light-skinned Chinese, Japanese, or dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not thereby acquire different status under the act from other members of his group. Of course, when an individual applying for citizenship has the skin of a different color than is usual for a member of the group from which he claims to come, excuse me, from which he claims to come, a strong burden of proof then rests upon him to show by the usual methods of proving genealogy that he is in fact a member of that group. After the individual has been traced into his group, the second question the court must then answer is whether the members of the group as a whole are white persons as Congress understood it, the term in 1790 when it first enacted the statute. In deciding this latter question, according to the statute, the test is not how the group in question will be classified by ethnologists who have made a study of the racial origin, but rather what group of people then living in 1790 were characteristics then existing were intended by Congress to be classified as white persons. Applying this principle, the court finds the petitioner, i.e. the Arab, is not a white person within the meaning of that act. Did you hear that? He wasn't a white person. Black people couldn't even consider to be a white person. Arabs couldn't be considered a white person. Chinese were not considered to be a white person based off the statute's intent. All right? They was willing to give up their nationality, genealogy, and ethnicity. Why they want to do that, I have no idea. But as we see, that is the case as established in the Wade versus Hassan. So based upon the new laws governing citizenship in North America based off the patriotic and the founding fathers who did not adopt the essential characters of the Anglo-Saxons, which don't need no constitution, statute, etc., but they in turn did need a constitution to give them limitations, shows us that they didn't follow the prescription as established by John Hobbes and what we call the social contract. They breached the social contract. All right? Let's see. There's another case. Dealing with citizenship. Under that same clause. This case is United States versus Sing Tuck or Doe. 1904 case, United States Supreme Court. United States Supreme Court, all right? United States versus Sing Tuck or Doe. This is going to be fun to y'all. Check this out. Now, this case happened to be with the Chinese. All right? Syllabus. It is one of the necessities of administrative justice that all questions, even though fundamentals, should be determined in an orderly way, and it is within the power of Congress to require one asserting the right to enter this country on the grounds that he is a citizen to establish his citizenship in some reasonable way. A mere allegation of citizenship by a person of Chinese descent is not sufficient to oust the inspector of jurisdiction under the alien immigrant law and allow a resort to the court without taking the appeal to the secretary provided for in the act. And unless such appeal has been taken in deciding, a writ of habeas corpus will not be denied. Let's deal with the subject matter. The fact which involved the right to enter the United States of certain persons of Chinese descent who claim to be a citizen of the United States are stated in the opinion of the court. Justice Holmes delivered opinion of the court. Brother Holmes, you better be listening. This is a writ of habeas corpus against the Chinese inspector and inspector of immigration. It appeared from his return that the Chinese person concerned came from China by way of Canada and were seeking admission to the United States. On examination by the inspector, Five gave their names, stated that they were born in the United States, and answered no further questions. Fifth Amendment right. The rest gave their names and then stood mute, not even alleging citizenship. The rest gave their names and then stood mute and not even alleging citizenship. The inspector decided against their right to enter the country and informed them of their right to appeal to the Secretary of Commerce and Labor. No appeal was taken, and while they were detained at a properly designated detention houses for return to China, a petition was filed by a lawyer purporting to act on their behalf, alleging that they were all citizens of the United States, and this writ was obtained, i.e. a writ. And the circuit court, the detention was adjudged to be lawful, and the writ was dismissed without a trial on the merits. This decision was reversed by the Circuit Court of Appeals on the grounds that the parties concerned were entitled to a judicial investigation of their status. You hear that? Of their status. Let's go there. I got you, brother. You're my son. Okay? Let's read this, y'all. Very important. As a result of the breach of the social contract based off the social compact that's based upon Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence that the founding fathers, who the patriotic did not depend upon for their earthly salvation, let alone our spiritual salvation, was dependent upon by the unification of church and state under the authority of the crown. It says, can anything be more harsh and arbitrary? Coming to a port of the United States as these petitioners did into the port of Malone, placed as they were in a house of detention, shut off from the communication with friends and counsel, examined before an inspector, with no one to advise or counsel, only such witnesses present as the inspector. as the expected may designate, and upon an adverse decision, compelled to give notice of appeal within 2 days. Within 3 days, the transcript forwarded to the Commissioner General, and nothing to be considered by him except the testimony obtained in the Star Chamber proceedings. All right, there go that Star Chamber. We talked about that. Everybody know about the Star Chamber. That's not the King's Bench, y'all. That's not the King's Bench. This is called due process of law to protect the right of American citizens and sufficient to prevent inquiry into the court. But it is said that the applicants did not prove before the immigration officer that they were citizens, that some simply alleged the fact while others said nothing, that they were told that if they would give the names of 2 witnesses, their testimony would be taken and considered. All right? So if they had witnesses to testify to that fact that they were citizens, then it will be honored. Their testimony will be taken and considered. But what provision of law is there for compelling the attendance of a witness before such immigration officer or for taking disposition? And of what avail would be an ex parte inquiry of such a witness? Must an American citizen seeking to return to this his native land be compelled to bring with him 2 witnesses to prove the place of his birth, or else be denied his right to return and all opportunity of establishing his citizenship in this country in this court of his country? No such rule is enforced against American citizens of Anglo-Saxon descent. And if this be as claimed a government of laws and not of men, I do not think it should be enforced against American citizens of Chinese descent. Did y'all hear that power, y'all? Did you hear that? This totally contradicts Enway versus Hassan, based off the meaning and interpretation of the 1790 Naturalization Act for the free white persons, i.e. the founding fathers, i.e. Those patriots who did not depend upon the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence as an Anglo-American citizen of Anglo-Saxon descent here in their own land and their own country. I'm going to read it again. It's going to say it. But it is said that the applicant did not prove before the immigration. All right? This is what you got to prove: citizenship, a birth certificate, driver license, a social security card. These are all the instruments that denote to a social contract, which is an unconscionable contract if you're an Anglo-Saxon birth, because you don't need those instruments. You're a citizen by way of birth. It is said that the applicant did not prove before the immigration officer that they were citizens, that some simply alleged the fact while others said nothing, that they were told that if they would give the names of 2 witnesses, their testimony would be taken and considered. But what provision of law is there for compelling the attendance of a witness before such immigration officers or for taking disposition? And of what avail would be an ex parte inquiry of such a witness? Must an American citizen seeking to return to this his native land be compelled to bring with him 2 witnesses to prove the place of his birth, or else be denied his right to return and all opportunity of establishing his citizenship in the court of his country? No such rule is enforced against an American citizen of Anglo-Saxon descent, and if this be as claimed a government of law and not of men, you hear that? I do not think it should be enforced against American citizens of Chinese descent. So that means these men are not lords, and these lords are not men, because in the Black Law Dictionary, men are vassals to the lords, and the lords were the ones who are the owners of the land. Okay? Who are owners of the land. My moderators, are we still running? Are we still live? Our moderators, let me know if we're still live. Okay, thank you, Countess. Let's keep it moving. Okay, this is closing. So back to the social contract. And moral philosophy, the social contract is an idea, theory, or model that usually, although not always, concerns the legitimacy of the authority of the state over the individual. Conceptualized in the age of enlightenment, is the core concept of constitutionalism, would not necessarily convene and write down in a constituent assembly and constitution. All right. It says social contracts, arguments typically are that individuals have consented either explicitly or tacitly to surrender some of their freedom and submit to the authority of the ruler or the decision of a majority in exchange for protection of the remaining rights or maintenance of the social order. Okay? That's social contract. Everybody see that. It's nothing more than body of politics. It's nothing more than a body of politics. So the social contract for your protected rights, remaining rights that you have based outside of those you surrendered for the betterment of the whole, is the social based upon the social contract that created the body of politics, which is the sphere in which the laws work in your rim. All right? The body of politics is the polity since the city, rim, or state considered metaphorically as a physical body. Historically, that sovereign is typically portrayed as the body's head, and the analogy may also be extended to other anatomical parts, as the political reading at Aristotle fables the belly in its member. And jurisprudence, all right, which is the key point in jurisprudence. So, Brother Hopkins, don't look at it from the abstract as you've been. Look at it from jurisprudence, as Chief Judge Brown said, which you said that. Who said that that was their family? Was that you? Or Sister Search? Somebody said that was their surnames related to. But if that's the case, then you should associate or understand or identify to contract that you and everybody else that was in that video today, based upon or applicable to. One second. My camera. All right, anyhow. It said in Latin Europe, the body of politics took on a jurisprudential significance by being identified with the legal theory of the corporation, gaining salience in the political thought from the 13th century on. In English law, the image of the body of politics developed to the theory of the king's two bodies, all right, and the crown as the corporation sole. Hold on for 1 second, y'all. So it says the Latin Europe, the body politic took on a jurisprudential Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence significance by being identified with the legal theory of a corporation, gaining savings in the political though from the 13th century on. And English law, it is a British law, it's a Jewish law, it's a American law, it's an English law. We all speak English, right? Right? So in English law, the image of the body politic developed into the theory of the king's two bodies and the crown as a corporation sole. So if that's the case, then we must understand that the social contract based off the body of politics is either dictated by either God or the devil. Either God or the devil. All right? Law and sin. Law and sin. Okay? Very simple. So in closing, let's qualify that with case law. This Vreeland versus Burns. Vreeland versus Burns. 1977 case. Did y'all hear that? 1977 case. Pull that up. This is in closing. Here we go. So you're listening up, right, Brother Hopkins? Let's see. Vreeland versus Burns. 1977 case. Hoboken, New Jersey. Yes, it is. Hoboken, New Jersey. Page 34. We know Vreeland versus Harris clearly says that the legislator has invested with New Jersey Supreme Court the power of the king's bench, which is the prerogative, which is the king's prerogative, and that no legislator can sever. Okay? So the Supreme Court of New Jersey was empowered with the authority of the king's bench, meaning the king prerogative, which is your ability to be able to petition the king. That was severed because of the complexities and technicalities of the prerogative writs that the 1947 judiciary deemed it to erase the procedural necessities as established in the Vreeland versus Harris. Okay? But we know that the king's bench and the power of the king's bench is still there. It's just the king was missing. But guess what? The king's back. So based upon that, the United States Supreme Court has surrendered their authority because we're reading the United States Supreme Court case law. And what did they say? Based upon the social compact or the social contract on the body of politics as we adopted as our jurisprudence, this is what it says. It must be remembered A state constitution, unlike the federal constitution, is not a grant, but a limitation of legislative power. The function of the legislator is to exercise a portion of the sovereign power residing in the first instance in the people, subject to the limitation imposed by the federal constitution. All right? In our own, as well as those so fundamental in the social compact and the Anglo-Saxon principles of natural justice as to be necessarily implied, and in determining the operative scope of the constitutional limitation, courts are enjoined to collect the sense and meaning of the clause, the goal being to ascertain the intent of the people in imposing the particular restraint. Did y'all hear that? Did you hear that? So we know the Anglo-Saxon principles of natural justice is the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence that Chief Judge Brown was talking about. And he was from the United States Supreme Court. And the United States Supreme Court said that you can separate the King's Bench from the New Jersey Supreme Court. How we know that? Let's look at it. Another case law. Beckney versus New Jersey. New Jersey Supreme Court. Right there, y'all. Beckney versus New Jersey Highway Authority. All right. Supreme Court of New Jersey. And state, at the time of the adoption of the 1947 Constitution, the limitation embodied in the 1844 Constitution had not been the subject of judicial scrutiny and assessment in relation to a public corporation of the class now before us and that purpose to be served. And the adoption of the limitation without phraseological change is without determining the significance. We seek for the reasoning spirit of the provisions considered in the context of related limitations and provisions of the instrument embodying the organic law. What is its essential quality and meaning when compared with kindred provisions operative in the same area of the governmental action? A state constitution, unlike the federal constitution, is not a grant, but a limitation of legislative power. The state legislature exercised a portion of sovereignty, power residing in the people, subject to the limitation imposed by the federal constitution and its organic law, as well as the organic law, as well as those so fundamental in the social compact and the Anglo-Saxon principles of natural justice as to be necessarily implied. And it's the determination of the operative scope of such constitutional limitations. Courts are enjoined, as in the construction of statutes and all other written instruments, to collect the sense and meaning of the clause by comparing one part with another, and by considering all the parts as a whole and not one part as a separate and independent provision, bearing no relation to the remainder. This is the primary rule of exposition of constitutional provision. The thing sought is the intent of the people in imposing the particular restraint, Words and clauses are not to be isolated, but related to each other and to the whole of the instrument, if the real sense of the expression is to be had. The purpose of judicial interpretation is the discovery of the true sense of the form of words which are used, taking all in part into consideration, and in fairly possible giving them all effect. Whether the subject matter of such interpretive inquiry be an agreement between parties, a statute, or a constitution, the object is thought which it expresses. Okay? So we understand that it's all based upon the social contract, the social compact, the, the original agreement that was established by the law. And that law is Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, which does not need a constitution, a statute, or an act of the legislation to bring it to effect. Because the only thing that used to bring to effect is the practice, the custom, and the usage that you have forgotten. So come back home, my brothers and sisters, my heirs, my subjects, my kindred. I love you all. And we end this lesson as we greet each other in what we call peace.